Hello everyone, welcome to our new science video. Today we're gonna talk about Unit 4, Adapting to Change. The first concept in this unit is talking about adaptation. So, have you ever heard about this word before? Okay, let's remember together what's the meaning of adaptation. But before answering what's meant by adaptation, let's answer these questions first. The first one, look at this picture and answer. Can penguins live in the desert? Of course no. Do you know why? Because they can survive easily in the desert that has hard environmental factors such as extreme climate or weather conditions and the shortage in the environmental resources. Shortage means less, and the environmental resources such as water, food, and so on. So, penguins aren't adapted to live there. Look at this picture. So, can Dorcas gazelle live in the desert or semi-desert? Of course, yes. Do you know why? Yep, because it gets some properties or characteristics from its parents. These properties called genetic factors that allow it to survive in the desert, such as its body color, which helps it to adapt in its environment by making camouflage. And Dorcas gazelle has the ability to not drink water for several months. So, Dorcas gazelle is adapted to live in the desert. So, these genetic factors control what traits or properties get passed down or inherited from parents to offspring. But the question is, do you know what's meant by genetic factors or what are genes? Actually, genes are tiny structures which found in the nucleus of the cells of living organisms. And genes carry the traits such as the color of your eyes, the shape of your ears and nose, and so on. So, these inherited traits affect the structure of living organisms and their life. Let's take some examples of the inherited traits. As we said before, these inherited traits in humans such as the eye color or the nose shape. Inherited traits in animals like the fur color or the fur length. In plants like the length and the shape of leaves. So, from here, can you tell what's meant by adaptation? Adaptation, it is a process that helps living organisms to survive and stay alive in their environments. And we have two types of adaptation. Number one is the structural or physical adaptation, and the second one is behavioral adaptation. So we're gonna know what's meant by structural or physical adaptation. It is the adaptation that is related to the body structure of living organism to help it to survive. But behavioral adaptation, it is the change in the behaviors or acts of living organisms to help it to survive. So, let's take some examples of structural adaptation to understand it clearly. First one, in plants. So, from this picture, you can see that the stem of some plants have some thorns or spines, and this is considered as structural adaptation. By the way, these thorns help the plant to protect it from eaten by another living organism. The second picture and the second example here is the polar bear. As you can see that the polar bear has thick white fur to help the polar bear to live easily in the cold climate, and it has white fur to help the polar bear to sneak and to eat its prey easily. In behavioral adaptation, like this picture in front of you, as you can see that plants grow always towards the light to make photosynthesis process. Growing plants towards the light is considered as behavioral adaptation. The second example here for behavioral adaptation is, yes, bird migration. And migration, as we're gonna say now, means traveling some animals from one place to another place for different or for many reasons. So let's talk about bird migration in details. Actually, what's meant by migration? It means that a group of animals like birds moves together to another place seasonally or every year, and often they return to the place from where they are started. And this cycle is repeated. As we said before, the migration happens every year. So, we have many examples of bird migration, but the most famous one is like this one, steppe eagle. Bird migrates to search for the best conditions that help them to reproduce or breed and preserve or save their species. And we said before another example that migrate to another place to reproduce. Do you remember it? Yes, flamingo. Okay, another reason for bird migration is for searching for different food sources. And the last reason here is finding suitable habitats during different times of year. Actually, migratory birds may face many challenges during their journey, such as extreme weather conditions, such as storms, rains, and so on. Number two, shortage of food and water. Shortage, as we said before, means less. Number three, limited resting sites or stopovers due to the habitat loss. And habitat loss, if you can remember from the last year, means the destruction of the habitat due to pollution. Number four, predators. So, migratory birds must have structural characteristics or properties or traits that help them to survive during their journey. So, let's talk about migratory birds in Egypt. We have two examples here, like falcons and eagles. We have two main stopovers in Egypt, which are Red Sea and Nile River, and they are considered as important and main stopovers for millions of migratory birds every year. The main factors that attract the flocks or groups of migratory birds to Egypt: number one, the moderate winter climate. Number two, the area of Red Sea that contains different habitats or different environments, such as coastal environment, marine environment, and there are two main factors that affect the growth, behavior, structure of the living organisms. These two main factors are environmental factors and genetic factors. So let's talk about the first one, environmental factors. Those are external factors that surround the living organisms, and without them, the living organisms won't survive in their habitat, such as availability of water, light, and the size of habitat. Number one is the size of habitat. It affects the number of different species that live in one place. By increasing the size of habitat, such as ocean, you will find different and more species live there. Number two is the availability of water. We said before that no living organism can live without water, so it affects the growth of an animal during its life cycle. Number three, availability of water and light together, and the living organisms that depend on water and light together is plants. So, availability of water and light affects the growth of plants as they make photosynthesis process. It affects the growth of trees and shrubs. It affects the amount of plants on which some animals feed on. Number 2 is genetics factors. As we mentioned before, genetic factors like the genes that carry our traits. And as we said before, that genetic factors or genes are inherited from our parents. So, genetic factors such as the body size of animals, the length of plants, and like the fur color of animals. The body size of animals, like this picture in front of you, it affects the growth of a kitten when its body size changes gradually until it becomes as its parents. The length of plants, like this picture in front of you, you can see that we have different plants, and each type of plants has its own limit to grow, so it affects the growth of plants like herbs, usually shorter than the long flowering plants in the forest. Number 3, the fur color of animals, and like this picture in front of you, it affects the shape of the young rabbit when it has brown spots on its fur like its parents. So, look at these pictures and answer. What are the habitat of these living organisms and why? First one, polar bear. Yep, the habitat here is Arctic region. Gorilla, yeah, from this picture, it's tropical rainforest, and the last one, the small lizard, is desert. But do you know why? As we said before, that polar bear has white fur and thick white fur. The second one, gorilla, it has long and strong arms to help gorillas to climb the trees. Number 3, it has its body covered with scales to hide easily between the rocks of the desert. So from here we can tell that each environment has its specific and special climate and different types of animals and plants with different traits that help them to survive. So let's take some examples to understand how different genetic factors and environmental factors affect the survival of living organisms. And the first example is penguins. We have two types of penguins, emperor penguin and African penguin. Emperor penguin, from this map you can see they live in Antarctica, but African penguin live along the coast of South Africa. So emperor penguin, they have thick blubber or fatty layers, and their skin are covered with dense feathers to keep its body warm. But African penguins, around each of its eye, it has a circle of skin that doesn't have any feathers completely to help its body cool fast in hot weather. The second example here is Arctic fox. Arctic fox live in Arctic environment. Arctic fox has thick white fur like polar bear, of course, to warm its body. Then we have poison dart frog. It's type of frogs that live in tropical rainforest environment, and it has colorful poisonous skin to hide from its enemies or predators and protect itself from predators. The last one is the lizard. As we said before, a lizard lives in desert environment, and its body covered with sandy colored scales to hide among or between the rocks in the desert. Now let's talk about desert plants, and we're gonna see how they adapt easily to live in the desert. We have many examples of the plants that live in desert, such as acacia tree, opuntia, grasses, spiny shrubs, and palms. Desert environment in Egypt, like Egypt's western desert. So let's talk about their adaptations. How can plants adapt in living in desert? Most of them are characterized by. So let's talk about the size of the plant. Most of them are usually small and herbal. The leaves of the plants that live in desert, some of them have thick leaves to store water. Roots, most of them have short extended roots near to the earth's surface to draw or to absorb any available water. And the stem, they have thick stems like leaves to store water. Some of them have thorns and spines on their stem and branches to keep away herbivores, which means animals that eat plants. In desert, when the rain falls, some plants reach the flowering stage quickly and produce seeds that can live for a long time to adapt the shortage of rainfall. Let's talk about our ecosystem. Do you know what's meant by ecosystem? Ecosystem is an area that contains biotic factors or living organisms and abiotic factors or non-living things that interact or connect together. So we have two types of ecosystem. Ecosystem could be small and could be large. Small like the small garden between buildings. And this small garden contains grass, insects and weeds. And we have large ecosystems such as rainforests like Arctic regions. Plants and animals live in the same ecosystem and depend on each other to live and reproduce. So let's take one example of this. Caribou feeds on grasses, so this animal feeds on this plant. And we have another animals such as wolves hunt caribou and other prey. So, as we said before, ecosystem contains living organisms or biotic factors such as animals, humans, plants, bacteria, and abiotic factors such as non-living things like soil, temperature, water, precipitation, air, and sunlight. How do abiotic factors affect on the growth of living organisms? Light, air, and water are basic needs for plants to grow, to make photosynthesis process. Plants respond to the amount of light and dark they receive daily. Some flowering plants may produce or may bear fruits when the days are longer than the nights in some environments. If the light is too intense or too much, it might damage the plant's parts and cause their drying or burning. So, light helps in the plant's growth. There are some other flowering plants can grow and produce flowers when the days are shorter than the nights, such as chrysanthemum plant. How do abiotic factors affect on the adaptation of living organisms? Living organisms make adaptation according to the availability or limitation of water and light, as we've mentioned before. Let's take an example of limited resources like desert. Deserts are the most extreme environments on the earth. Deserts may be hot or cold. All types of desert have little. As we said that we have two types of deserts. We have hot deserts and cold deserts. In hot deserts, they have little amount of groundwater far below the ground surface. Small pools of water are formed inside rocks during rains that falls for short periods of time on deserts. Some plants which live in these environments have long roots to get the deep groundwater. Other plants have short extended roots near to the Earth's surface to catch the smallest drops of dew. In cold desert, as we said before, Antarctica is a desert biome that its temperature are cold all the year, where its temperature in winter go below freezing or below zero. But in summer, it could reach 21 Celsius. So let's take an example of genetic factors that differs in the same species. Like cats, we have two types of cats, Birman cat and Sphinx cat. From this picture, you can see that Birman cat has long silky hair with different colors because it inherits or gets its long silky hair from its parents, while Sphinx cat doesn't have any hair or may have only very fine or small hair because it inherits its hairless body from its parents. So, if I asked you give reason, although Birman and Sphinx are cats, there is no Sphinx cat has long hair like Birman cat. Because Sphinx cat doesn't have the genetic factors for long hair which is found in Birman cat. Living organisms have structural characteristics or physical traits to adapt to abiotic factors in different environments, and over time, these structural characteristics transfer from parents to offspring, as we said before. So, they will have the trait that help them to survive in extreme environmental conditions. Inherited traits help plants in desert adapted to survive in extreme conditions of desert, such as the very hot weather and very little rainfall. So, each generation of plants becomes more stronger and able to adapt due to inherited traits which transfer from parents' plants to their offspring. Let's talk about the factors that affect the human growth. We have three main factors such as lifestyle choices, environmental factors, and genetic factors. In lifestyle choices, our choices could affect our growth, like making bad habits and good habits. Bad habits like smoking and eating any unhealthy food like chips, like soda, of course, it will negatively affect and harm our bodies and our health and our growth. But making or doing good habits like eating healthy food, like doing exercises, it plays an important role in our growth and develop our health and behaviors. In environmental factors, it could positively affect health and growth and could negatively affect health and growth. So, positively, how can environmental factors positively affect health and growth? If our environment is healthy and clean, but it could harm our health and growth if there are some problems in our environments, such as healthcare isn't available, water may be far away or unsafe to drink, difficulty to obtain food, and sanitation service isn't available that causes spreading of different diseases, and sanitation services like the unclean water which comes from toilets and kitchens. Genetic factors affect our body structure, like hair color, like eye color, which are inherited from our parents. Genes carry inherited traits, as we said before, from parents to offspring. So, genes are responsible for determining the body features such as the way your ear loops hang, the length of your fingers, and how tall you. I hope you got this lesson and see you next time, inshallah, in another. Thank you for listening.